Yeah, so we are going to this is Chipakkan and welcome to Otherworldly. Still go to say the new normal. Uh and we are here to talk about ghosts tonight and hauntings. I was talking with a friend who was talking about um hauntings and the question is, how do you know that it's haunted? How do you know? He'd been watching uh, move horror movies. And of course, in a horror movie, anything paranormal has got to be scary. So if it is inexplicable by modern science, then obviously there's something wrong going on.
Mm.
So, uh, but there is a large group. He noticed there's a lot of movies these days that have the young couple going out into the um, into getting a house, and he's off paying for the mortgage, and she's there and she's seeing the phenomenon, and he is very disbelieving, and he doesn't believe that it's, and the question is she really crazy as he's suggesting, or is she is there really spooky foo going on? And depending on the the script, it could go either way. What he had noticed was a lot of the more recent films seem to be having this. It's not the husband who has been gaslighting his wife who's killed by the ghost at the end. It's the wife, and the husband is now looking for a new somebody to wash his dishes and bear his children. And he
Mm.
said, "This is kind of weird. I thought that the Hollywood was supposed to be liberal, and it seems to me they're all being very conservative. But it's a thing, is that when you are experiencing it, you do wonder, am I imagining it or not? And he had seen at a friend's house, which is why I put the header up of the shadows on the wall. He watched a shadow go across the wall, human shadow, when there was nothing between the light source and the wall,
Mm.
which is not the usual way of shadows. So, um, and there are many other manifestations that can show that there might be a ghost there. From not just you might see something, but you might hear something, you might smell something. A lot of ghosts are. That's my father's pipe tobacco. I smell that. That's my mom's perfume that I've never nobody else uses it around me. I've never had anybody else use it. So it can be just scent. And as one person said, we're 500 feet from the road and nobody here smokes. So when I smell my mother's cigarettes, I know it's not a waft of cigarette smoke coming in from the windows. But there are many um, ways you can perceive it. But I'm also thinking about the Ghostbusters. It was saying that, well, it could be past lives intruding on present time, or it could be. He said, I don't believe in any of those things.
Well, that's all right. I don't either.
Yeah, that's my Egon's voice. But anyway, so yeah, we it could be a lot of things, and the question is that I'm putting: is it a ghost? Is it a poltergeist? Is it as a housewite? Is it an apparition? Is it a spirit? Is it an imaginary friend? Is it a presence of a god? Is it a guardian spirit? And why does it matter? Well, it matters because that kind of tells you. Oh yeah, I forgot the ever popular supernatural answer. Is it a demon? Um, Everything in supernatural is a demon. Um, but it depends on how you are going to respond to it. If you're pretty sure it is poltergeist activity, then what you need to do is find out, who is feeling powerless, who is feeling repressed. Often it's teenagers. Sometimes it's repressed, anyone who hasn't got any agency in their life. And suddenly you've got
earlier than that in my family.
apporting or appearing or disappearing or moving around. And you have to, and the way to deal with that is to simply help the person who is being traumatized. So I'm going to suggest at the beginning, before we open it up to everybody else, that you need to figure out whether you're dealing with a shade or a ancestor manifesting, or and so to that extent, yes, it's not. I don't think it's as important what you're calling them as how you're dealing with them. And before I run away, I mean, open the floor, as it were, I'm going to say, and treating them with some respect and not fear is the first thing that I think is really important. Don't be, oh, it's a spooky thing. Oh, should I tell the car story? I think, Starwolf, you may have heard that before. My sister had just gotten her license. She was like 16, and she was driving home at night, and she looked over in the seat beside her, alone in the car, and there was a man sitting there. I mean, it wasn't see-through. He was a man sitting there. She stopped the car, jumped out, looked in, and there was nobody there. So she carefully checked around the car, got back in the door, and as soon as she closed the door and the light went out, the man appeared again, and she jumped out again. And then she figured out that if the light was on, she couldn't see him, and if the light wasn't on, she could see him. So she, being 16 and not knowing too much about the car yet, didn't know how to turn on the light and drive. So she used her foot to hold the door ajar for the last 4 miles on the way home so that she couldn't see him.
Never heard that one.
No,
Oh my.
that's new unto us.
Yeah.
But that to me, it's also a reminder that, it's not just houses that can be haunted.
No.
And
Yeah.
the chances are good that it wasn't her car that was haunted, because it was never seen again. But perhaps that section of road, or
One of the
maybe it was just a
traditional
spirit who was
ghostly
trying to get
hitchhikers.
home.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
And the
Yeah,
concept of a shade that is visible only when the light is off is a classic trope in movies and television and books.
and I've got
so-
a story about a haunted section of road, but it also reminds me, Tchipakkan, that one of the most important things you kind of bounced off going by is the concept of, what is real. And the first step is to accept the fact that if you are perceiving it, it has some basis in reality. Maybe it's not anybody else's basis in reality. But we get put off by the notion that what is real is what we've been taught previously by people who don't sense these things. And it does sometimes make us a little deaf, dumb, and blind to what's really going on in our lives.
Well, that programming it's what keeps most of the human race sane.
You call that sane?
I object to the use of the term sane.
Yeah. Well,
Keep them from
Sometimes people who
screaming
can't
then.
cope, people who can't cope with it need a way to not have to cope with it sometimes.
Right.
And I think that's exactly correct, that there are people, a lot of people, who are not, for whatever reason, prepared for these kind of things to be real.
Yeah.
And we owe it to them not to
and
make
the,
them go where they can't go.
storytelling, movies, TV, etc., feed into that.
Mhm.
But what is the phrase that those who cannot hear the music think those who are dancing to it are mad?
Something like that.
Yes.
I don't think I've heard that before, but I like it.
Well, I didn't get the quote quite right, but
The thought was, I think, spot on.
It conveys the right idea.
okay. Just off the top, how many of the folks here have had a experience with a ghost of some variety, an apparition of some variety or not?
Multiple.
Multiple. Okay, so we have a pretty good crowd here. And anybody want to share a story?
Yep.
Mine's a quick one.
Oh, okay.
There was a cinema here in Syracuse, in North Syracuse, that I used to go to with friends, and went in one night for a movie, and I suddenly realized that as I sat there waiting for the movie to start, the sparsely filled theater, there were a few people coming in, but there were also other people coming in who really weren't there.
Oh.
Including one that sat about 3 seats away from me. So I just watched people coming in. It was cool.
Well, they won't throw popcorn at you.
Yeah. They were
They
just
probably don't
continuing to
block
have
you.
their Saturday night.
They probably don't block your view either if they're in front of you. But
No.
I had an experience where it wasn't my house. This was during a time when Feather and I were very closely connected to a, for lack of a better term, New Age shop in Milford, New Hampshire, and where we got our Reiki attunements. And at one point, I was called upon to participate in, I guess you would call it a cleansing. There was this very unhappy spirit in this house in Amherst, New Hampshire. And people were brought in to find out what's the problem and what we can do about it. And the way the story evolved was that the unhappy spirit was a woman who was, in this day and age, waiting for her son and husband to arrive by stagecoach, not aware that they had been killed in an accident on the way there. But they were there, they were just on the other side. And there was a need for A, convince her that they were on the other side, and B, make a bridge for her, because apparently she was so set on the notion they were still coming that it was a kind of an uphill struggle to open the path for her. And the subtle work I left to other people. I was there apparently just for magical brute force, in that they saw the husband and the son like waving, "Mom, come on." And they started to build a bridge, and it was a bit shaky. And I just looked at it, and it kind of instinctively just picked up some magical I-beam on my shoulder and started reinforcing the bridge. And I built a very solid 2-lane highway to the other side. And I took the concept of what it needed to be from the other people, but it was my sheer muscle that put up the girders and beams, to use an analogy. And finally, she was able to look across and see them, and she trusted the bridge. So she was able to walk over to the other side. And once she was reunited with them, the whole thing went up like a Kodak flash bulb, and we were done. But that was a fascinating personal story of magical heavy lifting. And it tells me that my magical self apparently has bigger muscles than my regular self. But I thought that one was worth sharing because Feather and I were talking earlier about the things she remembers that I did, and that stood out. That was a big deal to get called in to help on that. Because really, why do they need me here? Oh, well, now I know.
Uh-huh.
So that's one of mine.
I got a couple.
All right.
I promise to keep it brief.
Don't have to be brief, but you have to be interesting.
Okay, well, I'll keep it interesting. My my family history is loaded with hauntings. My dad had a number of interesting stories about hauntings when he was growing up. And his father died when he was 9 years old, but wasn't necessarily gone. He had a very distinctive walk because his left leg was missing above the knee.
Oh,
He'd have it amputated because of gangrene at one point when he was in the Merchant Marine. So his leg, his prosthesis, was this wooden prosthesis that had a spring in it that would straighten the leg. So you could hear every once in a while in my grandmother's house this very distinctive walk with a long pause and then two steps very close together, because he'd take a long step and then he'd swing his other leg over and step down so that the knee locked, and then he'd take another step with his right foot. So thump, 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 thump. And there was that kind of manifestation in the house. Also, sometimes they mentioned a light that would just drift on through certain rooms. My father also told one story about when he was sitting in their living room with his younger brother. They were the only ones in the house at the time. All the lights were out. I think his brother was sitting on the couch. He was sitting on an easy chair. And for no reason whatsoever, they all of a sudden just looked at each other. And there was a very hairy arm sticking out of the darkness between them. And they both looked away very quickly. And then when they finally nerved up enough to look back, it was gone. But my dad also worked nights in a liquor store in the very blackest part of Los Angeles. Adams Boulevard between Normandy and Western, an area affectionately known as Narcotics Alley, because if it existed, you could get it there. So he was working nights. He was always armed. And that's when we just kind of got used to Grandpa showing up to kind of keep an eye on his grandkids while Pop was doing something dangerous to keep food on the table. Because he was working nights at the liquor store, and then he'd go to Trade Tech to study electronics during the day. So we just got used to seeing Grandpa around. We always knew it was him because he and my dad looked virtually identical, according to other relatives. One of his uncles said, "You are your father's son. If I had never met you, I'd have been able to pick you out of a crowd in the middle of the afternoon on 7th and Hollywood Way." And he followed us through several moves. Finally, we were living in a house several blocks away, and we were all still going to school at that point, and both of our parents working. They didn't get home until late. So we'd get home from school, and one of the ladies from house down at the other end of the block, her name was Irma, she would come over and just kind of putter around the house, incidentally straightening and tidying, but basically just, keeping an eye on us, making sure we were looked after. And when this arrangement started, we figured that it would be a good idea to let her know that Grandpa was probably going to check her out at some point. Take a look at who's looking after his grandkids.
Oh, not a creepy kind of check her out.
No. Just
Checking credentials.
yeah, bona fides, as it were.
Yes, exactly.
Let's.
Well, I was wondering if your grandfather was a horn dog after he was dead. You know, it's like
I don't even know if he was a horn dog while he was alive.
I'm sorry.
I do know that he was no variety of Christian. As a matter of fact, he was non-religious, although apparently anytime he walked past a church, he would tip his hat. He was actually baptized before he died. He died of tuberculosis.
Mm.
And at the time, he and my grandmother both had tuberculosis, were both hospitalized.
Mm.
And that's when my grandmother had a habit of praying for things that she felt she needed. So she prayed, asked Saint Teresa, the little flower, to intercede for her and basically say, look, I want to get my family together. I want to recover, get out of this hospital, get my family back together, and continue to raise them. And if I am allowed to do this, I will pray the rosary every day of my life from then on. And she was quite definite about this. She said, if my petition is to be granted, I would like a sign. 3 roses, 2 red, 1 white. Well, there were some grade school children that would visit the hospital, usually on Sundays. And one little girl, if I remember the story correctly, she was a little black girl, and she brought flowers. And she gave flowers to my grandmother. 3 roses, 2 red, 1 white.
Hmm.
She did indeed recover. She did get her family back together, and she was able to continue to raise them. And to the best of anybody's knowledge, she did, in fact, pray the rosary every day for the rest of her life. Most days twice, just in case through sickness or accident, she missed a day.
That is awesome.
That's cool.
So anyway, we told our housekeeper about the lady, neighbor lady, about Grandpa coming to visit. She thought that was just adorable. We had an imaginary friend. She thought that was so funny. She told our parents about it. And instead of getting the ha ha ha, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, they said, oh yeah, we probably should have warned you about that.
Mhm.
Oh,
Because of course they knew it too. I mean, I remember mentioning that poltergeist activity in my family started way early. Yeah, it was while my dad was working nights in the liquor store, and there were various things that would happen. Always while we were in bed asleep. We didn't hear any of it, but my mom was awake for all of it. And as a matter of fact, at one point, my dad's best friend was in the house at the time, and they heard footsteps just running along the back of the house, up over the back porch, which was a wooden raised porch with steps on either side. And then footsteps running along. He was out the door like a shot because they were sitting in the kitchen, which was right next to that door. And there wasn't anybody to be seen. When we checked the next morning, there were, the ground was wet because it had been raining at some point. And there were muddy footprints in the ground that ended abruptly. Weird thing about that is, a few years ago, I had an out-of-body experience where, for no reason at all, I was running along a fence line that I recognized.
uh-huh.
So it was probably you.
It was probably me. Oh, yeah. So housekeeper still thought it was funny until She was upstairs tidying up in the master bathroom off of my parents' bedroom, and she saw out of the corner of her eye somebody she thought was my dad. So she said, "Hello, hello, Mr. Taylor," and turned around, and he vanished right in front of her. She freaked 6 different ways, was in practical hysterics when she told my parents about it later. And mind you, all 4 of us kids were like, "We told you about this, and we told you about this exactly so that you wouldn't freak out." Oh, well, yeah, she would not set foot in that house unaccompanied by one of her brothers or something. And she only did it that way 3 times. And that was it.
Arnett, you talked about resembling your father. I'm sitting here on my birthday today thinking about my father and the fact that I was born on the same month and day that he was.
No.
And I grew up to be the same height, weight, same hair color. Everything about us was identical. I used to joke that we were identical twins born to different mothers 32 years apart.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I don't know that that's a haunting so much as how can that not affect you? How can I not be carrying along my father with me?
Oh, yeah.
It's a spiritual, it's almost a haunting because it's just like sometimes the way that, I've got artifacts from Jen's father that were passed to me when he died. And I don't have any of these things for my father, although I have my mother's father's vintage Bullivel wristwatch. But it's always this presence with me. And when I think, and I always think about Dad on our mutual birthday. So it's not a haunted house by any means, but there is to some degree this notion that my father is still with me in some way.
Yeah, that
And
may be something very similar to having an ancestral connection. And
yeah,
those can be powerful and follow you.
And that is what I feel because I remember when I was a kid, I always wanted to be like my father. And I never realized I was going to grow up to be the kind of person that you could hardly tell us apart in a lineup. But that ancestral connection, it was, we had these ties through conversations. Because Dad never got to meet Feather. He died less than a month shy of his 73rd birthday, 74th rather. And we were, going to go down and visit him shortly, and it never happened in time. But there's still this feeling that there is that ancestral connection. And, like I say, I guess maybe I have more of a broader sense of what a haunting might be. It's a spiritual presence somewhere that can be detected and defined and may have obvious and meaningful results. I don't know, what else you think about that?
Now, I've met several people that have various ancestors that make themselves present, and it's not so much as a haunting of an astral spiritual presence that's there, but one that is projected almost like an obsession, where people give the ancestor space because the energy and relationships is there.
Right.
So when I look at and investigate things, it's always a matter of what's the energetic context so that I can understand whether it's an ancestor or a real spirit of a presence. Is it a recording of a house? Not necessarily a white. It's just a recording. And as Tchipakkan said, yeah, and looking for poltergeist, which ends up being half the thing, or a lot of people who are excitable also project energy and reflect the energy that some of these other beings want you to project so that they can exist. So it's interesting trying to figure out which one's which. You know, it's
Yeah,
Have
well,
you
that
by
was
any
my
chance
point.
read Needles of Stone Revisited?
Okay.
There's that one, and the Rollright Ritual also deals with some of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Needles of Stone Revisited is a book that delves into certain types of energetic phenomena from the point of view of a dowser.
Ah,
But it touches
Oh.
on a lot of things, including different types of hauntings, including what are called ghouls, which is an emotional imprint
Mm.
to a place that manifests under certain conditions. And I think they mentioned recordings too. At any rate, I know I've read a number of accounts of situations where, when the conditions are right, a particular scene will replay itself over and over again in houses of particular character.
I tend to think of those as recordings, or sometimes shades, but again,
I would call them
not to get
phantasms. But
hung up on words.
yeah, yeah. I found that up in New York, where houses are built in such a way that they do record things, with the wood, the chips, and the old-fashioned plaster,
Mhm.
spun glass.
Plaster is great for that. Limestone content.
Yes, moisture, weather, pressure, and also if you are not necessarily a ley line, but you are in a place where the astral flows into the house. We had something where my last house here in Cumming with my ex, we actually live at an edge of where a telluric current kind of spins around this little promontory and bumps up against the toes of the Appalachian Ridge up down here. And it wasn't so much as spirits, but fragments, like different bits of shells of spirits would show up now and then. But one time we got a peso that showed up, and within a day, a spirit did show up that had an ensouled presence, and I was too busy. I was not trying to pay attention, but it stuck its hand right through my wife's head. She had this immediate raging migraine, and I just like, but you had to look at it, yanked it, said, okay, who do you belong to? Go outside, invoke. You're a Catholic, okay. You, Jesus, get here, come get him. And that look was like, who are you invoking me? And this is one of yours. He's kind of got lost here. You mind? You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Get your kid under control.
What do you think this is,
pretty much.
Walmart?
Oh,
But
I love this stuff because one of the things I look at is the reality that we're sitting here and we're making words of each other.
Yeah.
Now, words as a means of communication suck pretty badly, but it's pretty much all we have. And me, always in the background is, what is the greater reality that we are all seeing different facets of and to describe in our own way? And I think what we're seeing is we are seeing different fragments of the same all-encompassing spiritual reality that
it's all a matter of context. Yeah.
it's all a matter of context. That's actually correct. And
I've
we
actually
are
seen,
we are our context. So you were about to say?
yeah, I've seen where there was one recording of a house. I went to visit this young lady. Nothing came of it, but visiting in a house that she was living in, and when there is a spirit that's actively wanting to get my attention and I'm not paying attention, somehow it loves to step on my instep. It's just like it's like the pressure in my instep. Okay, you got my attention. And the house itself was old and imprinted, but there was an actual spirit there that was pretty much running on instinct. And her whole thing, she wanted to tend to the sheep. You know, it was her house. She wanted to tend. There was no sheep there, but she was part of the house. It's funny up in New York. There, I find spirits that are attached to buildings. Down here, I'm finding spirits that are kind of attached to the energy of the land, which is kind of different. So it's different.
Yeah, certainly Feather and I, now that we've been here since 2010, and she grew up here, but we were away for a number of years, and then we came back, and we have lived in houses that are all, to the best of my knowledge, at least 100 years old. And that's true of where we sit right now, that this is a house with a lot of history. And, you know, you talk about that plaster. I keep thinking it's one of the reasons you can find so many masonry bits at good prices at Amazon, because that's what it takes to hang a picture in one of these bloody places. Because it is fine grained cement. But, you know, I do wonder who else is in here with us.
I haven't noticed anybody yet,
Not
but I
yet.
haven't been looking. And I tend to be somewhat blind to the presence of visible spirits at
Yeah.
any level. And generally, I don't contact spirits that happen to be around. I
Mhm.
get asked to contact a spirit, and I do that. And it's generally animals.
Yeah.
So,
On the other hand, somebody took one of your necklaces and tied the chain in a knot.
well, that's true. I found a necklace I had put aside, tied in a knot when I went to pick it up the next
And I was
morning.
standing at her door, and she picks it up and looks at me. And, no, I didn't do that. And I
Yeah.
don't think the cats are that dexterous. So she just looks at her and says, "All right, who did
That's
that?"
the one thing that's happened so far. Yeah.
Oh, I ought to, I want to share because it's fun and funny. Friends of ours had gone into, it had bought a new house, a new old house. It had been there since the 1800s, and they had a, and they had a 3-year-old, and he mentioned to his parents that he had, there were 3 ladies in his room, and they said, okay, those are just dead people, dear. There's nothing to worry about. You just be polite to them, and there's no big deal. And so, but he became more and more upset, and his parents couldn't see them, but they could feel them. But but the child, being 3, was quite energetically aware, and he became very disturbed because he was, 2 of the ladies would tell him, it's not nice to lie, and the other lady, because he would talk to the ladies about the other ladies. 2 of the ladies were together and they saw each other, but they didn't see the third ghost, and the third ghost didn't see the other 2 ghosts, and all of the ghosts were telling the kid, don't make up stories, dear. You're making it up, and you should.
Ghosts telling you not to make up stories like.
and the poor, no 3-year-old is emotionally capable of standing up to adults telling him not to be naughty. So the parents had to call in their friends who were good at that kind of thing, and send the spirits onward, because they were getting the kid upset, because the 2 ladies had, lived together and died together, and the other lady had lived in the house at a different time period, and they'd do things like, they'd brush his hair for him and take care of him, but you don't tell a kid that they can't see something that they can see, because that's very hard on a kid. And I've always liked that story because I hadn't heard any other stories about ghosts who couldn't see each other.
Yeah.
Guess they weren't on the same wavelength or something.
Yeah,
Mhm.
different frequency, different
But
time
he
periods.
could see both. He could see all the frequencies. So anyway, that's just another fun story.
I've heard of a few other households that have had spirits that are out of sync with each other.
Hmm.
Out of sync. Okay.
Yeah, and it's either different contexts of energy of time and place. The energy's different that's picked up in the house, or even more crazily, sometimes there's like a shadow people playing going across as well. So that was the craziest thing I've heard of before. But I've seen the one house where there's like two levels of different things going on. So it's not impossible.
So you have different frequency bands, for lack of a better term, that you can have layers to the spiritual presence in a location. And the layers may not necessarily be very communicative with each other.
Exactly right. Well, my first ghost story is my grandfather came back to say goodbye when I was 7. That's all he did. Come downstairs. Goodbye, Sonny. Just evaporate. On he went. Never saw him again. That was, but my mother's boyfriend, Fred, I knew he passed on, but there was a shell, and it wasn't a real presence of him, but his shell was with me. I didn't put my hand up. What's up with that?
There's a feature where if you hold your hand up long enough, it will assume you were holding it up.
Oh, wow.
Okay, speaking of hauntings,
I got to test this out.
Just hold it still.
Now, go on with your story about the shell.
Yeah, his shell just showed up and stayed with me for like till a handful of years after my mother passed, and my mother's presence picked up his shell and took it off. And since then, I haven't smelled his tobacco. I haven't smelled his presence. It was his tobacco. He'd show up every now and then for that presence, and just like, okay, Fred, something to check it in, but it was like nothing important. It just my mother just took him away in another dream that I saw. It's like haven't had his presence show up since.
Yeah, I think that communicating with the dead when you're dreaming makes sense because so much easier to talk to somebody who hasn't got their body on when you haven't got yours on.
yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, because you're not wearing the earth suit when you're wandering around in your dreamscape.
Yep. The filters on the meat puppet are really, really restrictive.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can change your energetic context, either dream walking or plane walking, easier than you can prancing just in your body.
Now, who was it? My friend Carenza was talking about his. He had a friend who practiced. He figured he was practicing lucid dreaming. He was looking for control, and discovered that because he interacted with spirits while he was in dream walking, he became more sensitive and started being able to see spirits while he was wearing his body. And he was saying that a lot of people who practice lucid dreaming, some people stop because they found out. I was hoping to get him here tonight, that they lost their prophetic dreaming power. And I thought that was a little odd, but
That does sound odd.
but on the other hand, the idea that if you practice with your dream work, you might develop your talent to be more sensitive to spirits. Now, apparently spirits listen to me, but I don't perceive them. So if I want to work with them, I have to have a medium with me to talk to. I had in our dorm there was somebody who was being bothered by a spirit, especially manifesting as the two red glowing eyes in the dark, and he's like, I'm the devil. No, you're not.
Oh God. That
No,
would
you're not. Well, I'm a powerful demon. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
The spiritual equivalent to claiming to be Napoleon. Sorry.
yeah, and so basically I just said, look, you're not. You did was you forgot to cross over when you had the opportunity, and you have to cross now. It was he was just excited by being able to make contact with somebody, and he had first he'd gone through the isolation, the shunning. Nobody's talking to me anymore, and then he learned to do some manifestation, and so he decided, based on his previous instruction during life, that he must be a devil. It's like, no, you got to get past that, kid, and just move on. But
sorry, kid.
Or it's just something that he could feed off so he could manifest.
but
Well, yeah.
You got to understand that a lot they aren't necessarily what they say they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that being blasé about it can be an advantage.
Well, yeah, and if you can go in there with open eyes, not muddied by any preconceptions, you can see this thing farting fire at you and saying, I am the greatest demon ever lived. And you can look at it and you can say, well, no, you're not. Although I'm sorry to say, it reminds me of a joke I heard that occurred in a church someplace, presumably from the context, one of these typical evangelical types. And one day at the height of the sermon, the devil appears. Kafoom! Everybody runs screaming out of the church except one guy just sits there. And the devil looks around, scowls down at the guy and says, Mortal, dost that now fear me? The guy looks up and says, why should I have been married to your sister for 20 years?
Yep. There's an Irish version of that story. A woman who wants to get revenge on her husband because he comes home late from the pub just about every night. So she gets all duded up with a mask and stuff and lies in wait in the bushes by the side of the road on his way home. And so there comes her husband staggering along, and she leaps out of the bushes and says, I am the devil and I'm here to drag you to hell. Guy, 3 sheets to the wind, he's doing this thing here. Oh, yeah? I am the devil. Do you not fear me? Oh, no. I married your sister. How'd you do your honor? I married your sister.
Variation on a theme there.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the idea that if you go dream walking or do lucid dreaming or do any conscious exercise in this unconscious realm, you strengthen the bonds, the links between that realm and your daily waking experience, which means you are more likely to perceive a spirit that's like, just wandering through your office while you work. Does that sound reasonable?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that happens. And it's not a healthy thing to do.
Okay.
You learn to do that. I did when I was much younger, like open up all the frequencies and being, not a good thing because
Open
now not
hailing
only,
frequencies.
oh, it was like live, dead, spirits, presences, you name it, and it will drive you nuts. You eventually have to learn to tune it out, literally. If you don't, it will. First of all, if you are open to all these frequencies and all these things that you experience, you keep adding it as a repertoire. Just think of it as like a ham operator who buys all these crystals for all these different frequencies, and now you have invested in it, and it's all connected to you. It's like a energetic karma that you end up being a reflection point for everything that's going there. In other words, it's just as magically anchoring you to that environment because all those threads are just weaving you into a spot. Like someone took a giant tapestry and you just a little fly and you got weaved into it.
Ooh.
I learned how to let it all go. Otherwise, my life would be, you wouldn't even know me. I'd probably be some crazy lunatic in Albany, New York.
But they may very well think that we are anyway. Because we
well,
believe
you know, it makes you special. How?
Yeah. But it occurs to me, I've got another good story that it's not my story. It's a friend of mine told me about it. He was in one part of his career, he was a trucker. And he stopped and picked up a hitchhiker beside the road and dropped her off at her house. And then he noticed her sweater was there. And he stopped and he went back to the house where he dropped her off and knocked on the door with a sweater in his hand. Now, we've all heard this story, the Phantom Hitchhiker. We know this one.
Friend of a friend.
But his story was not quite the same. With the, oh my God, she died X years ago. An older woman answered the door, and she looked at him and she said, "Oh, she's done it again. Would you like a cup of coffee and I'll explain it to you?" And it was just that she had, the ghost keeps doing it, and her mother's finally gotten used to it, and it's no longer the, oh my God, my daughter is still out there. It's like, oh, darn, I gotta help these poor strangers who are giving my daughter rides even though she's dead.
Oh man.
Yeah.
But it's a variation on the same one, but it sounds to me it says, yeah, that is a true one. And
Apparently it happens.
Yeah.
And I happened to have bumped into one of the guys. But you don't hear them unless you're ready to listen and not judge when the other person has a story to tell. And
I have a funny story.
Oh, goody! I love
between Troy and Bennington, Route 7 is known for ghost hitchhikers and ghost hotels.
Really?
There was a story there that a couple stopped at this hotel and stayed the night, and no one was there, and they left money on a banister, and they went someplace and says, "Hey, that place burned down 25 years ago." They go back and they find the coins they left on the banister. So all these stories are going in my head, and I'm just taking a pleasure drive between Troy and I was heading towards Bennington. And I see a hitchhiker. I stop and pick him up. He gets in the car. And I'm driving along, says, "Where are you headed to?" And his face turned me, and it was just this semi-ashen pale face, and in his teeth it had that green grippy whatever, and I just turned my face back forward and I just went like, "Steel yourself, because now this is not your typical ghost." And I went to this, and I says, where are you going?" And he turned to me, and I realized it was a real person, but his teeth was wired shut, and he needed to ride home. But I said, and it's like, "Sorry, dude, I thought you were a ghost with the stuff stuck between your teeth." And he says, "Oh man, you're making me laugh. Please, it hurts too much." This was like a non-ghost story, but it was hilarious.
That's great. Well, my favorite Phantom Hitchhiker actually was concerned the goddess Pele.
Oh, yes.
You know the one I'm talking about, Arnett,
I
right?
think so, yes.
So it's a couple, they're vacationing in Hawaii, and they heard all about Pele and how she rules, especially the fire. And they're trucking along up this narrow 2-lane road, and they see this woman in a long red dress hitchhiking. So they stop and let her in. She says, "You mind if I smoke?" No, and she opens the window, and she's just kind of chain smoking, blowing out the window. And then suddenly she sits up and says, "Oh, I'll get out here." So they pull off the road, let her out at just the exact moment. A big semi-rig comes flying over the crest in the other direction and would have smeared them all over the mountain if they'd been on the road. And they went back and left offerings to Pele. I would too. It just seems like she showed up out of nowhere and just saved their lives kind of casually.
Cool.
Yeah, I like that one.
One of these days I'll have to revisit my sandwich cat story from the hospital, but
Oh boy, yeah.
but that was one where that was a situation where apparently I was open to all the portals and veils and
Yeah, and with that link between you and the hospital across the street and all of that.
next door.
Well, next door. I mean, you can look out your window and see where you
I
were
would there were
born.
spirits of all kinds all around me, sprites and goblins and sandwich cats, which we had a episode back in August where I talked about it.
Yeah.
But it clearly has left me wide open because since then I've had experiences of seeing fairies and things all around me, and I'm accepting it now. This is just what I do now.
Yeah, just part of reality.
Yeah.
And better
And we
than
battle
the
and
bratty,
treat for them now and then, and
yeah, better than the bratty kids down the street. But
But there are other things that we can say. To me, the key is be calm about it.
yeah,
When I grew up, my feeling is when you can have a doorknob get stuck in one position and then look over in half an hour or hour later, stitch back. But when you see the doorknob twist one way and then it twists the other way again to make the
while you're looking.
Okay.
Yeah.
While you're looking, I was like, okay, there's something going on there. But if it's not hostile, if it's not doing anything, well, the more annoying thing is if you get when they make this stuff go away. But that could be the good folk. And so we can't. And if you have somebody who's helping with the chores, that could be a housewife. So just because things are moving around doesn't mean that it is necessarily a ghost. Just because your kid is talking to somebody nobody else can see doesn't mean it's a ghost. It could be a ghost. It could be their grandmother. Ask them who it is. But it could be a guardian spirit.
Well, I want to catch the bugger that watches me as I go around, and the minute I put down a tool, it moves it to someplace else.
Oh, they're annoying. I tend to think that that's pixies.
Pixies?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, come on, the battery tester was on my freaking desk 10 minutes ago. Where is it now?
And no one was in the room with you.
Right.
Yeah. But a pixie, you can get rid of the pixies if you spray the room with some blessed water with salt and iron and nettle in it. But
you're talking about Star Wolf's napalm.
I've seen people, you want spiritual napalm, which is how many people treat sage and various kinds of smudging. Now, I think that that's rather rude. They say, oh, well, if you had any manifestation, then immediately smudge the entire house. Well,
yeah.
I think it's rude.
Find out what it is and why they're there.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Do they want something from you? Do they need something from you?
Introduce yourself and ask them quietly and politely.
Yeah.
Ask for a sign.
Yes. Well, that's it. Yeah, especially since, sorry, I'm not so tuned in as I wish I were. Can you leave me some sign to let me know that you heard me, that I'm okay with you being here or whatever.
Yeah, because it could be a guardian spirit. Could be somebody who's there to help you.
Exactly. And I'll
like the
take all the help.
grandfather.
I take all the help I can get these days.
I had a weird experience in my current house. The second day we were here, first day I was actually in the house. I was asleep in the house that night. My wife was in our trailer, the camping trailer that we've got. And the one that I just replaced the flush valve on, which reacquaints me with hate. So anyway, second night, we are actually at the house. First night, I'm actually in the house, and I have 3 of my hounds with me. All the doors are closed. Well, I should say both. Front and back doors are the only ones where there's actually any kind of access. And all of a sudden, there was something in the dining room. And the 3 hounds saw it, and they went for it. And they started working in concert to try and catch this thing. I caught the barest glimpses of it. It was either a really small, it looked like either a really small coyote or a really big raccoon. All I could see was black, appeared to be on 4 limbs and had a bushy tail. And my hounds are chasing it, and they got it cornered basically right directly behind me. And then it vanished.
That's enough fun. Enough fun for one day.
Yeah, they hunted around for it, but it was gone, and they were extremely confused. And there was no means of ingress or egress. There's no way outside here. None. No windows open. No, the doors into the connecting rooms were shut. So unless it could flatten itself to, like 1/4 of an inch thick in an instant and get under the doors, there was basically no way for it to get out. No idea how it got in the first place, but that's the only time that's happened.
Huh. Now, if you'd said it was an octopus, I would have said 1/4 inch, no big deal.
Yeah, well, there's that, except for the beak, I think. But yeah, it's I've told a couple of my knowledgeable friends about this, and they said, well, could have been a skinwalker, could have been coyote for that matter.
Yeah.
You're out there. We've got a canal that runs right past the back of our property that goes to Truckee Lake. And then like 30 miles away from here, there is Pyramid Lake, which is widely reputed to be either haunted or cursed or both. So.
Well, it could be that I think it's nice that at least on social media, people are willing people have gotten comfortable with the thought of the Rainbow Bridge, and people expect that their pets will be waiting for them when they pass over.
Buried under pets.
Oh Lord, Feather and I are just
at the same time, most indigenous people have a respect for the spirits of the animals they kill and eat, which go to some kind of animal Summerland and then come back to make more animals. And so I see no reason why they couldn't have been just chasing a raccoon who hadn't quite figured out that he was dead yet.
It's possible, but he was awfully tangible.
Did he mess things around?
No, there wasn't anything in the house to be messed around. It's like I said, we hadn't even moved in yet.
Just him and the dogs.
Yeah, just him and the dogs in that particular area. There was.
And you standing there with your mouth hanging open.
Yeah, pretty much.
Trying to see something. Sometimes our cats chase things we can't see, and we call it poltergeist.
Poltergeist.
You hear that, Betty? Get the poltergeist.
But
yeah,
but Anybody else have seen animals? This is a fairly common trope, animals seeing the,
Yeah, my family had a cat when I was growing up named Mike, and he died a couple of years after we moved into a new house. And to this day, I still sometimes see him sitting around the kitchen, somewhere in the area where he was being fed.
Mm.
Yeah.
oh, I see that it's after, this has been fun.
Yeah, we technically are done.
Yeah,
Technically,
we're
we should-
about
we
5
should
minutes
wind up,
over. And
But yeah,
I was hoping all you would come up because the people from that neighborhood tend to have really good ghost stories.
well, she is going to be coming over and speaking to us in a few weeks.
Oh, yeah.
I forget which day, but because the file
Yeah,
didn't,
I actually don't have any personal ones. I lived in a metropolis in like apartments, not not in the villages, which had a chance to accumulate the
Yeah,
the spirits. And it's hard for spirits to accumulate when I was growing up. There was such a hostility toward anything supernatural for so long.
yeah, I mean, it was just like there was another official reality and you didn't question it. And it didn't have much room for things like ghost cats
Oh.
and things like that.
well, I think we will wind this up here, and I will remind everybody that very shortly the all the forms will be up on the website if you're interested in coming to Changing Times, Changing Worlds. First weekend in November, and otherwise we'll see you here again next week. And well, we may or may not, depending on your ability to join us. But thank you for coming, and
Next week.
always
It's been
open
fun.
to suggestions for guests I should invite or ideas that we should explore. I really like the open conversations like tonight.
Oh, yeah, these are wonderful. Where you
Okay.
get to hear, you
Yeah, I
realize
really enjoyed hearing all the stories.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's somehow if it's first person, it's
Mhm.
better than
Yeah.
it has more impact. It
Yeah.
has more weight to it. And
my poor
especially,
sister who didn't know how to turn the lights on in the car.
Oh dear, that was
Poor,
that must have
poor
been so
sweet,
scary.
that
Yeah.
is
sweet child.
Oh well.